programming with relative intensity. So, I've already done one of these, and I talked about the fact that, reps feel different, even if the relative intensity is the same, a 3 rep max and a 10 rep max feel very different. And the amount of fatigue and things like that you accrue are different. Well, here's something else to consider: the movements. Yeah. So, let's say you do a set of 10 overhead press, you know, so, okay, we're going to take 70% and do a set of 10 overhead press. How long does it take you to recover? 2 minutes before you can do it again, maybe? But, you do a set of 10 back squat with 70%. You're going to need more than 2 minutes. So whenever you think about these things, another thing to consider, and I love using relative intensity, but you can't use relative intensity and just assume that things are the same because, like, the relative intensity is the same, yes, but, the energy demand and the fatigue is very, very different. It's much easier to do, a 10 rep set of back squat than it is to do a 10 rep set of front squat. It feels very different. Even if the relative intensity was exactly the same, it feels very, very different. Let's say we took 80% and did a set of 6. That's going to hurt. But you do a set of 6 back squat, it's not that bad. You do a set of 6 front squat with 80%, that's rough. That's real rough. You can't breathe with a front squat, And so one of the things I want people to consider here is that the movements matter. It's even like if you think about something, let's say you did a set of curls, bicep curls, right? You do a really hard set of bicep curls. How long does it take you to recover? But now let's say you do, a set of back squats or front squats, same number of reps. It's going to take you a lot longer to recover. Leg extensions, presuming someone out there has actually figured out their 1 rep max leg extension, as if anyone does that. But let's say you knew your 1 rep max leg extension and you said, I'm going to do 80% for sets of 5. How long does it really take you to recover between those sets? However, if we said we're going to do 80% of our overhead squat for sets of 5, assuming that you have a good overhead squat, a lot of people are just limited by technique. So maybe we'll just back that up. We'll just make a back squat. So now you're going to do, sets of 5 with 80% back squat. It's going to take you a lot longer to recover than doing that leg extension. So, this is something for us to consider here whenever we're using relative intensity deadlift. You're going to do, hamstring curls with, 80% of your 1 rep max hamstring curl, sets of 5. Versus sets of 5, 80% of your max deadlift. These feel drastically different. So just because the relative intensity is the same doesn't mean that these things are equivalent. Obviously, your deadlift is going to be far heavier, and it's a deadlift. So it's going to be much more taxing. And so that's just something else I want to point out here. Whenever you're using relative intensity, you also have to consider, the demands of the movement, how much fatigue that movement creates. I can very easily bench press, 225 for 12 and, rest for 2 minutes and do it for another set of 12. Now, my front squat is much bigger than my bench press. But if I was to front squat 225, the same amount of weight, which is actually a lower percentage of my max for a set of 12, dude, I'm not going to be ready to do that again in just 2 minutes. No, it's going to take me much longer to recover. So here we are using something that's actually even less relative intensity, but because it's a front squat, right, it's going to take much longer to recover. I can overhead press 225 for a set of 3. Okay. If you compare that though to something like a three reps of deadlift, so I think I pulled 455 for 3 was my best deadlift lately. Those feel completely different. So if I overhead press 225 for 3, yeah, that's fine. And in a couple minutes I'm recovered. But if I pull 455 for 3, I'm not just recovered in like 2 or 3 minutes. It's probably gonna be like 5 or 6 minutes. So that's the point that I'm trying to drive home here, is that whenever you're doing these different movements, even if the relative intensity is the same, well, they have just a very different demand, very different cost, very different fatigue, very different effect on your body. And so that's just something else for you to consider.